All right. So today we're supposed to talk about what influences and powers we've personally have used as leaders. Like it's supposed to be more individual, our discussion today. Um, so a couple of things I was just going to talk about personally, how at the restaurant I worked at, I started as a cashier, and I just cashed a lot. But because I was trustworthy and I was charismatic, like I was really good at getting tips for the restaurant. Um, and then I also, what was it called? Well, I just self-presentation, I guess, is what it was in dynamicism, if I'm saying that right. Totally influenced me to be able to become a leader just as like an employee, not as a leader yet. And then because of those, I was able to move up to a managerial position. And in that position, I have to attain those same things. And I think because of like the influence of being trustworthy, I now am like in charge of handling a lot of the money and the accounting. And so for me personally, like I think self-presentation is huge, and also the
Yep.
trustworthiness. Uh, yeah.
Cool.
Who wants to go next?
Um, I guess I'll go next. It's not necessarily when because I can't really remember like my old jobs, but recently, like I'm part of like a sales team and insurance. I work at State Farm, and each month we have goals, and you can say that depending on who sells the most, like sometimes my supervisor will try to let me like give the newbies like advice on like how they should approach certain situations on where they can meet their goals, like whether it's how many sales they make per month. So I mean, I guess that gives me a little power. I just try to be personable again. I think in chapter 5 they discussed how by giving power to like distributing the power throughout your team is way more beneficial than abusing it yourself. So I think that's the best way to go if you have a position of power. I think that's the best way to go, and then that way your team would be more willing to follow you and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's how I see it.
Yeah. For me, I wouldn't say I've had a ton of like power positions. I thought of back when I was in high school, actually, I was student body president, so I kind of had legitimate power in that role. But I also had expert power because the reason I got the role and the reason people listened to me was because I had been doing it for the longest period of time. I had the most training and the most experience. Um, and then I think to some of the people within the organization, they probably would say that I had referent power with them, like with the freshmen that were just starting, that maybe looked at me like a role model in that position. I think people can have different, like the same person in the same position can be seen to have different power depending on who you ask, too.
Yeah.
I agree. Um, as far as my leadership experience goes, can you guys hear me? Sorry, my voice is like
Yeah.
drowning out.
You're good.
But so as far as like my leadership goes in like the workplace, I haven't had very many opportunities where I feel comfortable enough to like be a leader and kind of like get people to follow me the way that I kind of want to in places where I feel comfortable. like more in like a sorority sense. I'm in a sorority at ASU, so I've had many leadership roles within that organization, whether it was on the executive board or as a chairwoman. Um, I've always kind of used the situational approach where I kind of used specific traits with specific situations in order to get people to follow me or to be in or to carry that leadership role where like I want people to do a specific thing or like complete a specific task, but I would use certain traits that I knew. Like I would use like a stern way of speaking to certain people to get a certain task done, whereas like I would be nicer and kind of compliment others on the way that they're completing a task in order for them to follow through with it and finish it all the way through, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that it's really important to kind of like use different approaches depending on not only the way like your leadership style is, but also the way that the people who are following you kind of take in that leadership role or take in the way that you're talking to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that kind of ties into last week where we talked about the different approaches. Like
Exactly.
that was like situational approach.
Yes.
So that ties into that.
And I think like transactional and transformational and all of that stuff kind of ties in with it as well.
Yep.
Something I found really interesting in the text about leadership was how it talks about many companies use like material power to like get their followers motivated, and how that really is not a good thing in the long run. Like it's not self-sustaining and it's not going to last forever. It's all about like pride and like them wanting to do it because they want their company to be good and they want it to be strong and they want to do a good job. But I
feel like more than anything, it's kind of deceiving. You're just kind of putting on a good face to social media in order to kind of like get your face out there and get out everything that you want to be, even though it might not be entirely true, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. I was going to say I have had one experience with reward power that was good when I worked at Disney World for a year, and they have applausagrams and 4 keys cards, which are like physical appreciation cards basically that you get for something specific that someone saw you do and they want to recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of recognizing something that's intangible that you did, but you are getting a physical card and it goes on your record card. And there it works really well, but I think it's because of the way they do it. It's not like they're giving you a t-shirt, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of based on the infrastructure of the company and how it's run, so it varies. Any other comments?
As a follower, do you guys have types of power that you respond better to? That's kind of the second half of today's, I think.
I think like expert influence, expert power for me for sure. Like no matter if someone new came into the workplace and was in a higher position than me, if they didn't know what their job was and they were learning and like being trained, like a new GM comes in, I still like would have trouble like letting them lead me. And because I was like, you don't know exactly what you're doing, you're not trained, you haven't spent the time.
I agree. I think it's definitely like difficult to respect people or like look up to people who don't know what they're doing. And I think regardless of the situation, you always need to look up to your leader. And if the leader doesn't understand their responsibilities, how are you supposed to understand your responsibilities when they don't even have the power to give you them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely expert power would fall into that. Again, if they don't know what the hell they're doing, then
it's no point in listening to them.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think legitimate power, I think that's just like your title. So people feel empowered just by the position alone, and that definitely is not helpful or beneficial in any way. So again, it all has to tie in with one another. So if, they might have a title, but again, if they don't know what they're doing in that position, then it's not going to help. So they need to also show expert power and
Yeah.
Informational power, I believe that's the other one. So
I
yeah.
think I think for myself as a follower too, I also go well with reward power. I myself kind of look for that supportiveness or someone to kind of be there for me to like keep pushing me in order to complete this task and be like, you're doing such a good job, like you can do it so much better, like blah blah, kind of like giving me that like you can do this, like you got this sort of thing to be like, yeah, you know what, you're right, I can complete this task, I can do this, like I can go above and beyond to complete whatever you ask me to, sort of thing, regardless of if there's like kind of like that money intake that they want to give me or that reward or whatever, as long as there's that supportiveness kind of pushing me there from my leader, I think that's always kind of a nice thing to have there in order to get me to continue going.
Hmm. Yeah, personally, I agree with you guys on the expert power and being the most important. So I'll trust someone if they have that.
I agree.
Well, I think we're good, so I'm going to stop it.